Yo everybody, it's Najee Dorsey, Black Art in America, and you with Naj now.
Association to really
In Miami, baby.
Christa David at the Prison Art Gallery during Miami Art Basel. Christa, could you tell us about one of your favorite pieces?
Sure. I think one of my favorite pieces is probably this one, and this one is titled America and Me, It's Complicated, Okay? And this is actually me in the image, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's my favorite, because it is a very vulnerable piece, and it's a piece that really, as the title says, it talks about my relationship as a black woman living in America and having to grapple with the complicated history of racism in this country, the complicated history of the way black women in particular have been treated, and the space that we take up. So this is sort of where my work is going, like inserting myself and owning some of the issues that I'm dealing with. I'm not just talking about some anonymous actor in all of these conversations. I really want to be clear that these are my thoughts. These are things that I am thinking about as a black woman in America. So this is sort of where my work is going, and this is sort of why it's one of my favorite pieces at the moment.
So how do you see black art changing mindsets of viewers and changing the paradigm of how they think?
Well, I think, and you've heard this, it's like a lot. Representation matters, and I think it's so important as people of color, especially black people, for us to see ourselves in our art so that we can connect with it, so that we can also gain the benefit of what it means to experience art. Art is one of those interesting things where we know it does a lot of good for people, sort of like soul, but we're not really sure what are the benefits of art. But we know that it's beneficial. We know that it's important to have it around. We know that it bestows on us all types of sort of gifts and growth, right? So art is important. Because it's important, everybody should be able to experience it. And one of the easiest ways to get people to experience it is that folks need to have a connection to it. So having art that's not only made by black people, but that centers black people is critical, because now you've invited a whole group of people who may not have felt welcome being a part of a conversation. Now they're easily engaged because they can see themselves in the work. It's very sort of basic. That's the starting point. Once we can get people engaged in the art, then they can sort of begin to reap all the benefits that we know art can bring, as far as enriching your life, challenging you, providing a safe space for contemplation and just sort of personal self-development. So it's critical.
So, Christa, what influences how you create or make your art?
Okay, thank you. So collage is just one of my practices. I make art across a variety of media. The things that influence me the most is history. Like, I am very curious about how we got to our present day circumstances, and in order to understand that, you have to be grounded in history. Like, we didn't end up in this position in, say, for example, in the United States, with a lot of this sort of racial tension, racism, sexism, xenophoby, all that stuff has a history, and I'm deeply curious about how we got here. So a lot of my source material is sort of either culled from historical images that are, sort of open source public images, or they're symbols of things that were made way back in time, right? So things like, the flag, or some of the other historical images I use in my work. So that's my starting off point. I'm just very curious about history. I'm very curious about people, power, and stories. So that's sort of how I think about, those are the things I think about when I'm making my collage work. Shout out to Black Art in America. I am Christa David, and thank you so much for letting me share my work.